oh my. Put me in, coach, I'm ready to play fantasy. I know I turned 2 in a day, but the lace isn't hot in my veins. I can turn 2 in every way, so I turn to you 2 today and smash play. I'm prepared to listen. The X-Fippin' whip got me looking way past the pitches. Statistics all that I know, and I know that who is on first, he can say I'm ready to go. I ain't trying to steal second or third, cause I wanna win first. How am I to put all of these numbers to words? I know the terms from A to Z, it's like a gift and a curse. I know the difference between a splitter and a curve, but if I can't put it into points, man, then what's it worth? I need the truth, I need knowledge. Found this podcast with all of it, but what they call it? Turn 2. Turn 2, what it do? Win leagues, catch out. Peace.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Turn 2 podcast. I'm your host, Matt Williams. You can find me on Twitter at MATTWI77IMS. We are here for the continuing lockout edition, which I thought this was going to be a celebration show, everybody. I mean, we've all thought it was going to be a celebration show, but hey, enthusiasm is kind of up still. I thought it was going to be a sad day. We're recording this on Wednesday night, but overall, it's been a pretty positive day. Everyone is, still a little bummed out, but overall, no one's letting it keep them too down, which I like to see. I got a couple of great guests, and we are going to talk about the lockout. We're going to talk about what happens if there is a extended delay, how that may impact fantasy, and then we're going to get into the main part of the show will be projected lineups, roster resource, where everyone is being projected to go in a lineup and how that impacts fantasy drafts, because it does. So let's get to my guests. First off, joining me, if you're watching us live on YouTube right now, right next to me, Mr. Matty Kiwoom, over there at the High Heat Fantasy Baseball Podcast, SB streamer, friend of the podcast. Matty, what is up?
Matt, thank you for having me on. I'm beyond excited to chat it up. You mentioned it earlier. I wish we were celebrating. We're not, but it's all right. We'll bring the optimism.
Yeah, well, baseball is great no matter what. MLB's problem. It's not a baseball problem.
Exactly.
And other guests, utterly fantastic. If you don't follow him, you absolutely should. We'll get to his Twitter handle in a second, so you can do so. He's been putting out some really fantastic videos, some serious, some non-serious, all hilarious. At Torres Takes. Mr. Christopher Torres, what is up, Chris? Welcome to the show.
What's going on, guys? Happy to be here. I'm a little tired. I gave my State of Fantasy Baseball Twitter address today, and it took a lot out of me. But listen, I'm sad, just like all of you. But we're moving on. I just jumped into another draft and not letting it stop me. Like you said, it is nice to see people still putting out fantasy content. I think we're going to push through this, and finally do get baseball. It is going to feel so sweet.
I brought up your videos a second ago, and I just want to talk about them for a minute because I don't want to forget. You've been putting out these little short videos. In the beginning, it basically seemed like you were putting out like just little clips that were just useful information, and then you've kind of taken them on from there to be a little more like kind of skits as well. If you don't know if you want to tell everyone like kind of why you started doing them, how you went on before, but I do have one question for you I'd like to answer. One particular video, everyone can go back in your feed. You're out in the freezing cold, and you have on all of your winter gear, and you said that you're out in the freezing cold and you want to spread some fantasy baseball knowledge, and you actually scream at a family like down the sidewalk from you to tell them not to make sure they draft like a top 5 catcher. Was that your family, or did you scream at random people?
It would be a much better story if it was random people, but it was my family. It was all planned. My daughter was very excited to be in it. So we have some other. My daughter is like really into it. She's 6, and she's like asking me when we could do more videos together. So there'll be some more little skits with her, I'm sure. But they've been fun. I started doing them because I was telling you before. I used to write for Razzball, and I did it just last off season. And I just didn't have any more time to actually sit down and write an article. So this was just my way of kind of being creative, and obviously takes a lot less time than sitting down and doing an article. So just something fun to do and to, be engaged with the community.
So if anyone, again, everyone, make sure you go follow both of these guys right now. Again, I forget sometimes. So at Torres Takes on Twitter, make sure you follow. And then at Matty Kiwoom, just MattyKiwoom. But again, we'll hit that up at the end of the show too. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, the lockout, the owners. Everyone was done in by Bob Nightingale. It was supposed to be his redemption party. He was in front of everyone. Passan was like, sleep at the wheel. There was enthusiasm, but it ended up being just the owners just kind of putting out their own agenda. Apparently, who knows? I would like to think that if you're up until 3 a.m. negotiating back and forth, there had to have been some kind of progress made. But we saw what the owner's final offer is, and they're trying to penny pinch. They're trying to hold as much money as humanly possible, and then Manfred's out there, kind of spinning his wheels, basically saying stuff like,
"I'll give you anything you ask for, as long as it's something I don't want to give."
So, Matty, what are you making of this? First, what is your feeling right now? We're all kind of being optimistic. We're here talking baseball. We're having a good time, but what is your expectation as far as when you think the season's going to start?
Man, I mean, right now we're missing 6 games. So it's nothing catastrophic yet. But if you see the vibes and you kind of read the writing on the wall, it feels like at least a month. So I'm an optimistic person. I'm usually not trying to get too down in the dumps. So I'm going to say they're going to miss 1 month and they're ready to rock by the end of April, March 1st or May 1st.
All right. What do you think, Chris? Because we talked about this off camera. A lot of people have put out the information. The owners may not care necessarily as much as the first month of the season because there's cold weather. There's usually low attendance. The 25th game of the year is when they start to lose guarantees from television contracts. So, and they verbally have come out and said, and apparently threatened the players with, we're willing to miss a month. So it kind of feels like that's where maybe this is going to go. But what are your thoughts right now on your expectation and how are you handling it as far as how you're prepping for fantasy?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I really thought they were going to get something done. So I'm kind of done speculating. What you're saying about them missing a month, that makes sense. I see people saying June. Wouldn't be shocked if it's that either. So yeah, I have no idea. But what I'm doing to react to this is, so I just jumped into another draft. At first, it took me like an hour, and I'm like, I couldn't even think about baseball. I was so upset yesterday. but at that point, I'm like, wait a second. If we're having a shortened season, I don't think people are going to be fully up on like the advantage that or the change in value that some of these players are going to have by the season being delayed. And some of the players that jump to mind, that includes Ronald Acuna. I mean, people were a little hesitant to really put him in like the top 5 because they didn't know if he would start the season, if he would be fully healthy. Now I think we could, there's a much better chance that we're getting a full season, whatever that is, of Ronald Acuna. So, I mean, even coming off of the injury, yeah, there's a little concern there, but I think he's got to go like top 5 or 6 in that scenario if we get word that he's good to go to start the season. So he's one. Jacob Degrom is another one that I think gets a boost in value. He was going in the second round. I just took him at the beginning of the second at pick 17 in the draft I got into yesterday. I think he gets a huge boost in value because you really couldn't project him for more than like 150 innings. But now if everybody's innings are going down, though the quality of those innings that Degrom gives you, I mean, it's so impactful. So I think he should be like an end of the first rounder at this point. A few other ones.
I don't real quick because I think I know the direction going with the others. Before we move on to them,
Sure.
I agree with you on Acuna for sure, especially if we get good news. Missing a month probably works out perfectly for him being ready to go. He's still going to have to play in regular games. He'll probably miss a little bit of time, but it won't be as much, obviously. I do disagree on Degrom. This coming from a huge Mets fan, I think that we were going to get into, the Shane Bazes of the world, anyone who actually had a limited pitch count. I certainly think this helps because a shortened season, that they're automatically is not going to be as big a deal for him. But DeGrom or the pitchers that have injury concerns, I don't think the number of like a Carlos Rodon, I don't know if the length of the season necessarily bothers me in terms of the value. It's the fact that the injury can come at any time. Sandy Alderson came out last year and said he tore something. Degrom said he didn't. If he's going to get injured, it could happen anytime. It could happen at game 100. It could happen at game 2. So for me, personally, I wouldn't move him up, but that's kind of a, in my own way of thinking, valuing those kind of injuries. So yeah, I definitely agree with Acuna. I think Degrom or, the Lance McCullers of the world or anything like that. Yeah. I think that if I'm worried about them getting injured at any time, I'm still worried about them getting injured at any time. Matty, before we move on to other players, do you have an opinion on those Acuna, Degrom?
Yeah, I'm definitely with you lockstep on Acuna. The more rest, the more rehab he gets in, the better for him. Pitching is just tough, man. It's so unpredictable in terms of injuries and when those things can flare up. But I would be more optimistic on a guy like DeGrom. It would push him up a little bit for me. But at the end of the day, it's just, if there is a tear, if like you mentioned, or something flares up again, you never know. It's the missed games are the missed games. And if the Mets have playoff aspirations, they're going to play it careful with a guy like DeGrom.
Yeah,
I think it's a fair point. Yeah.
But I think Chris, I think you were going down the avenue I was suggesting already of maybe the pitchers that were due for just pitch count limitations. But who else were you about to suggest of players that are going to get a bump because if there's a delayed season or a more delayed season?
Yeah, you brought up one as Shane Baz. I mean, we knew he wasn't going to be going 180 innings, but if everybody's going, if the max is like 160, his 130 or whatever you're projecting him for, again, he gains more value in that scenario. And one other guy is Justin Verlander, another guy who I don't think we were really projecting, for a full workload. But I know there's concerns. He's had a year and a half off now, but if you look at his projections, they look pretty damn nice in limited innings. So again, I think he gets a value boost here.
I would say it gives a boost to Shohei Ohtani, but again, unless you're in a daily roster moves league, he's a hitter only. I've said this on my show before.
Right.
Unless you're in best ball, which I think he was only selected as a pitcher for your team like 4 times. He's basically every week a hitter. But this should help him overall, I would think. So any other players that you really think that, besides just the general player value of injuries, is there anything that people you think should think about in terms of how they're thinking about going about their drafts now? Are you if you have one and you have the ability to delay, are you delaying? Or are you going on business as usual? What are you doing, Matty?
Right now we're delaying. In my home leagues, we're waiting. We're hitting the pause button. And we're going to wait and see how it plays out, because the last thing you want to have is 14 guys rabble-rousing about a league that is yet to start. So I'm going to wait, hit the pause, and see how it plays out.
I like rabble-rousing, though. I would never pass
Solid, right?
A good rabble-rouse. What about you, Chris? Are you delaying anything, or are you just are you moving on as scheduled?
Yeah, I'm probably, so like I said, I jumped in another DC yesterday. That'll probably be it for me. For financial reasons, but also, just I want to wait and see, what happens. So just one more, and then just gonna see how it plays out.
Yeah, I mean some of the high stakes leagues, because people that are putting money like where their mouth is, like in a big way, you would think that they would be a little afraid of maybe jumping in there, or maybe reluctant and delay. Some of the main event leagues, they already sent out an email that the ones in like New York are being postponed, but there was the $1,000 DCs, I think today they filled up. They filled up today. Like 5 people signed up today. Vlad Sedler put out a $350 online championship. 10 people signed up to fill that today. So there's people that still have tons of enthusiasm and they're willing to draft today. So that's good to see. So that does it for the beginning. We don't know what's happening basically. So we just wanted to talk about it briefly because everyone's thinking what's on our mind, what's on your mind as far as what you should be doing right now in terms of when the season is starting and how that changes fantasy value. But we're going to get into the main topic for today, and that's projected lineups, because a lot of people always say ignore ADP, even though it's in the psyche of everyone. Even if you're not using ADP, or you think you don't want to use that to drive your decisions, it's staring you in the face in a draft room, unless you're just looking at a spreadsheet, not even looking. Things like that work your way into your brain as far as when you think should take a player. Some people care about the opinion of others. Oh, if I take him here, it'll be goofy. And that's the same as projected lineups. It's one of those things. If you go into like a roster resource and you see a player is projected to be on the bench or vice versa in a lineup at a certain spot, it can change how you feel about the player's value and where you're going to draft them. So what we're going to do is go through some of the ones that we've cherry picked, the ones we feel strongly about, mostly disagreement. Again, everyone, this isn't a knock a roster resource. Unbelievable tool, and it's very good. They're doing all the work, so you don't have to. Mike Curlin, our friend Mike_Curlin, you want to follow him. He actually has a great tool too. He just came out with, it's going to track lineups throughout the season. So make sure you go follow him too. But starting with you, Chris, we all picked out some of our favorite things to pick on here, and we'll give our reasons why we think maybe there's some hidden value, or there's maybe someone's being overvalued because of maybe a mistake that we think is happening on the projection site. So, Chris, who's your first player you want to bring up?
So I'm going to start with Luis Garcia. And the nice thing is that you have no idea who I'm talking about because there are so many Luis Garcias right now in the league. So I want you to guess who that is. Which Luis Garcia am I talking about?
The
I
pitcher?
already know.
The hitter?
Oh, I told you off air. Damn it.
So, yeah, we're talking about the Washington Nationals, everybody.
We are. Okay. So currently, Luis Garcia is projected to be a bench player for the Nationals. They have Alcides Escobar as a starting shortstop batting 7th. I'll be honest, I don't think that is the likeliest scenario. Let's remember that Luis Garcia was an everyday player for pretty much the entire month of September last year. He came up as a shortstop. Now, the Nationals signed Cesar Hernandez, most likely to play second base, which threw me off a little bit. But then again, as I did more research, I was reading that Luis Garcia actually was a shortstop who moved off of there to second base because they had Trey Turner. Well, obviously, Trey Turner is no longer there. So I think it's more likely that Garcia starts off the season as a starting shortstop and they move Alcides Escobar into more of a utility role. You know, I've seen some people out there actually saying Alcides Escobar is a great target for, you know, a guy who's going to play every day and accumulate at bats. I don't really think that's the case because even if he starts out as a starting shortstop, I don't think it's very likely that he stays there too long. You know, and here's the thing with Garcia. He's got some ability. Last year, he batted .303 in AAA with a .296 ISO. He's projected this year to hit in the majors between .260 and .270. The average is nothing great, but let's remember, he had a .296 ISO in AAA, so I think he does have the ability to match or beat those projections in the power department. So I like Luis Garcia this year. I got him as a backup second baseman in one of my leagues, and I think he's going to beat the projections for playing time.
All right, we're talking about Luis Garcia, the infielder for the Washington Nationals, because we already mentioned a lot of Luis Garcias. In terms of the kinds of leagues, because this is something that I'm trying to be more diligent about of what we're talking about. Is this someone you like across the board, points leagues, and Roto, and in like a standard 12 team? Is this something deeper? Where are you targeting Luis Garcia to actually draft?
Yeah, he's more of a deep league play. I mean, I think in you know, some of these deeper draft champions leagues, he's going. I'm pulling it up now at pick 466. So he's not a guy that you're going to need to draft in a 12-teamer, but someone I think you should keep on the watch list, especially if you see that he's playing every day. I think there's some ability there. You know, he's going to contribute in average and power, and he'll chip in a few steals as well. But I think he's a great target in 15 teams and deeper.
Yeah, I just want to make that. I always try to make that point for the audience now, just kind of let you know kind of where we're coming from. I do agree with you that he's definitely a guy that you should throw on a radar for even shallower formats, because if he does get the runaway playing time, you said he's got some pop, he's got some speed. He showed in the minor leagues that he has that additional pop. In the majors, he had like a major chase problem. He had a 39% O swing, which is like 8 points above average, but he had close to a 90% Z contact. So O swing is contact or swings outside of the zone, Z contact within the zone. So he's swinging a ton. He's making a ton of contact. So the contact is good. The swinging strike rate's not horrible. 11.5 is him. 11.2 is league average. So if he can just be a little more patient, and play every day, which, ask Tyler O'Neill, you take a step forward when you play every day. Luis Garcia on the Nationals, if he gets the playing time, that could be someone who could easily step forward. Do you have any opinion there, Matty? I know this is not exactly a player that gets talked about a bunch, so it's good to bring up guys like this.
Well, I do. I was, my research for drafts, he was someone that kind of popped in terms of late round value. But non-baseball wise, I do have a few of his rookie cards in my collection, so that's kind of
There
cool,
you
dude. So I hope he pops.
Hey, whatever the reason, right?
Yeah.
Matty, who is one of your guys? I know we're not quite done with the Nationals yet. We'll come back to them, but for the sake of just rotating a bit around, Matty, who's a guy right now that you disagree with their lineup projection?
So I was going around on roster research and roster resource, and I was trying to find something that stood out to me, something that I didn't agree with. And when I went to the Tampa Bay Rays, one guy popped out in a major way, and that's Randy Arozarena. They got him batting cleanup right now, and I don't see that whatsoever. Last year, batting in the 4-hole, he hit 236 with 3 extra base hits and only 16 runs and RBIs and limited plate appearances, only 65. And on top of that, he was 2 for 7 stealing bags. So if you're looking for a guy who is going to go 2020, which a lot of projection systems have him about 2020, you're not going to want him in the 4-hole. And on top of that, the projection systems have him around 70 ribbies. He's probably going to have more than that if they put him in the 4-hole. So I don't see that happening. I think that he has actually a higher OBP than the 3 guys ahead of him in roster resource, which is Brandon Lowe, Wander Franco, and Austin Meadows. I could see Brandon Lowe falling and switching places with Randy Arozarena come regular season, and Brandon Lowe also with those 39 homers. Maybe they drop him in the lineup, but Randy Arozarena batting fourth makes no sense to me.
I think there's one thing with this particular one for roster resource is how they are all default versus they're all default for right-handed pitching, and you can't easily switch, and they don't make it very obvious when there is a big change, especially with a team like the Rays that likes to fine tune everything. Right. Basically, Brandon Lau. I'm getting these straight.
There's so many lows.
So hard.
A lot of Luis Garcias and a lot of lows.
Brandon Lau and Randy Arozarena, far and wide, most of their at-bats for the entire season came in the leadoff spot, except one's a right-hander, one's a left-hander. So they, like you said, for Arozarena, most of his at-bats came batting 1 or 2. 234 plate appearances, 131. He only actually batted cleanup 65. Brandon Lau, same thing there. He batted leadoff most of the time, 275 plate appearances, basically most of it. He actually batted cleanup or fifth a lot more than Arozarena. So I think this is not only like we can talk about individual players here, but just how some people don't look at the right and left, where and the Rays are a great example because they change things up so much. So I do agree that more often than not, I can see that Arozarena is probably not going to be in that 4-hole, but again, they could trade Austin Meadows. It's the Rays. It's a headache to even think about. Yeah. But Chris, what do you think here? Because this is an interesting team, especially if you're hunting for runs or RBIs, but overall, these guys are all going to be in the top 4 of the lineup. So, at least they're going to give you some value. I'm kind of off of Arozarena in general. Those peripherals, man. I mean, the wheels could fall off this dude. I mean, we know the ceiling. We've seen it. But yeah, Chris, what are you thinking of Randy Arozarena in the Rays projected lineup?
Well, I would imagine roster resources hates the Rays because it really it doesn't even make sense to project their lineup because every day it's different. So I'm not even getting too caught up in where he's batting, but I just want to echo what you're saying, Matt, about, I think he's got a lot more risk than people are realizing this year. I mean, if you look, I know it's just one stat, but, I think we need to consider everything here. His expected batting average last year was 222, according to StatCast. I mean, that is scary. Mm-hmm. So like you said, those could fall off here. And the Rays have shown that they don't mind platooning. They have so many players. They have Josh Lowe or Lau. I don't know which one it is.
Yeah, I think he's Lowe.
He's ready to come up. So Josh Lowe, you have Bruhan. Brett Phillips had a, finish strong last year. They have so many options that if Arozarena starts losing at bats, or if he falls in the short slide of a platoon, I mean, your 4th round pick that you invested in him, that's going to really hurt. So I will have 0 shares of Arozarena this year.
he could easily fall to a platoon bat. Like you said, I mean, we talked about Brandon Lowe leading off. I mean, you got, again, Brujan, Margot. They have so many ways they can construct this lineup. And there's a lot of ways to bump Arena down in it. One question that I didn't get to earlier from the audience real quick before we move on, this had to do with the shortened season. So I just want to get it in real quick because I think a lot of people will be interested. This is from Bill Hammock. Do closers become more valuable as the season gets shortened? Matty, you want to kind of lead us off here?
I would say the big dogs do, the guys who are reliable. And I would also say the guys on winning teams. They're going to, anytime you present some sort of sprint as opposed to the marathon that is the 162 season, these teams are going to try to get these wins. Those guys I elevate slightly, but other than that, I'm not really messing with them too much.
What do you think, Chris? Because like I can see it both ways on how if there's an uncertainty, if you're going to lean on a guy more and the season's shorter, you can maybe be different rests in between, but mostly they're still going to be maybe back to backs or at most 3 and then get their days off. And there won't be a big difference, but I would also argue that if they're not going to be out there for length, you get some of the ratio and strikeout advantage of some of the early guys kind of goes away a little bit because they're not out there for longer, where some of the other guys off waivers could maybe catch up. So honestly, I can kind of see it either way. Right now, it's obviously up in the air because we don't know half the people, but we don't know half the closers the entire game. But what are your thoughts on this, Chris? Because I think you can actually argue it from either side. You're mute if you're talking. All right, Chris is no longer with us. So I don't know, Matty. What do you think of that? I mean, I brought up the other end of this, where you're drafting Hader, you're drafting Hendricks, Iglesias, and all these guys that have the job, and they're not sharing it with anyone, and they are moving all the way through the season. Usually, you're getting them for not only those saves, but you're drafting them early because they are out there for you every day, and they're helping you in other categories. Right. Do you think that having a shortened season where they're not out there as much can hurt, or would you rather just feel better about having the dominance and not having to chase because there's just less time to chase saves?
I think it's kind of a little bit of both there. And I hate to sit on the fence when it comes to any type of question, but I could kind of see it on both angles because on one end, I completely agree. The ratios and stuff that necessarily is not as strong because you're not getting what I call super saves, the 1 1/3, 1 2/3, 2 inning saves. They're probably going to stick away from that a little bit more because that particular game is not necessarily as big, not a big a slice of the pie because they're going to be going a lot shorter. But I think, like I said, I think I'm only really more interested in the guys that I'm more sure of because I do think in a shortened season, who knows what kind of truncated spring training they have, and we won't necessarily see guys be able to win a job like we do in the past.
I kind of agree with you there. Chris is back. Did you want to weigh in on that now that you're I think you heard the tail end of the argument there.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be interested to see where closers go. I mean, they've already been pushed up so much, and I think people are going to be onto this idea that you want to get those surefire guys in a shortened season. So, how much more these ADPs can go up. But I'm probably, and I did a video on this, I'm probably not going for those, the Hader, the Hendricks, Iglesias. I'm okay kind of speculating and seeing what happens. I think there's going to be so much turnover once these free agent signings start happening that, there's some guys that I like that I feel have a shot to step into, an everyday role.
And I think this is also something we're talking about closers and how that could be impacted by a shortened season. And again, this is a big thing that is dependent on your format. Draft and holds is a little different because you are obviously drafting with no free agency. The urgency to pick someone who has a job is a little higher. Whereas in Fab, it's definitely a lot less because you can afford to take another option or even pass until later if you feel like going fishing in Fab, because you can fix that. So it's like everything else, it depends on your format. So yeah, that's a little bit of a detour to talk about some bullpens for the shortened season. So getting back to the lineups, projected lineups at Roster Resource. One that I've seen, and I've been talking about it pretty much all off season. I kind of hate it when people are talking him up. Chris Clegg over at Fantrax actually was trying to peg the next like Cedric Mullins, and he actually named this guy, which I think is being maybe a little too kind, but still, I love Harold Ramirez over at the Cubs. In limited time with the now Guardians, he did a fantastic job. And when he went over to the Cubs and I look at their roster, I was immediately like, oh yes, this guy has all the tools. You look at what he did in spring training, or you look what he did like in the minor leagues. I don't think people give him quite enough credit for how much speed he has, because you look in 2022 or 2021 with Cleveland, 268, 7 home runs, 3 stolen bases over 361 plate appearances. This guy stole like 20 bases several times in the minor leagues. So he has some pop and he has some power and some speed. So Roster Resource, however, kind of disagrees with how much maybe the Cubs are going to value him. They have him on the bench or as a platoon guy with Rafael Ortega or Jason Hayward. I'll tell you one thing: Jason Hayward's terrible, and Rafael Ortega. I have shares, but who knows there? And then the other outfielder right now is Ian Happ, who's obviously not going anywhere. They have the DH listed as Clint Frazier, which I hope he get things turned around. But I mean, I don't know anything to suggest why they're just handing him an everyday role on Roster Resource. The only caveat here is it's the Cubs. I thought they were punting pretty much forever, and it didn't look like that they were actually going to be going for it. And then all of a sudden they go out and they sign Marcus Stroman. So who knows what they're up to, but I absolutely love Harold Ramirez, and I think he will be in there every day. It doesn't cost a lot, especially in even shallow formats. If you want to speculate, if you want to wait out in spring training to see what they're doing, maybe a guy that is on your short list for the waiver wire, but Harold Ramirez is definitely someone I think should be in there more often than not. And, that's something that is not currently posted. So I think he's someone you can get at a discount. I'm very interested in. Matty, any love for Harold Ramirez, or any questions with what the Cubs are up to? Because, who knows we'll get to Wilson Contreras. I believe Chris is going to bring him up in a second, but what do you think of Harold Ramirez?
Well, the Cubs as a whole, when I was doing my research for the show, Matty, it was like, I just didn't exactly agree, but I didn't disagree enough to list any of them because they have a bunch of kind of new players. I mean, the Nico Horners, the Madrigal, Ortegas, Fraziers. How are they going to play out? We don't exactly know. We don't have a spring training yet to kind of dictate that. I got to be honest, Ramirez was not necessarily on my radar. You bring him up right here, right now. All of a sudden, I'm looking at his Fangraphs page, and some things are popping on me. I mean, projected only 50-something games to play. You extrapolate that out. If he's going to bat around 270, 280, and if he can steal anywhere from 8 to 12 bags or on the high side like he did in the minors, that's somebody you got to throw in your lineup, because if the Cubs all of a sudden fancy themselves contenders, like apparently they may after the Stroman signing, the Clint Frazier bringing him aboard, they're going to play who's playing the best, right? And if Ortega's not cutting it or if Frazier doesn't turn it around, all of a sudden Ramirez could be a staple in that lineup.
Yeah, and you want to see what you have, especially in these younger, inexpensive players. Who knows? Maybe they try to trade Jason Hayward and get rid of to get rid of Contreras or Hendricks or they actually try to send money and a prospect, kind of like the Padres are trying to get rid of. Can't even think of his name at first base.
Hosmer.
But the thing with Harold Ramirez, I want to get Chris's thoughts here too, is they have him again on Roster Resource as a platoon bat. He is not a platoon bat. They have him in there as facing lefties who he did bat 288 against, 258 against righties, 5 of his 7 home runs. That's not a platoon bat. That's someone who should be in there every day in a better ballpark than in Cleveland. He's going over Chicago. So Harold Ramirez, I'm all over that. I think it's someone, him and Tyrone Taylor, like my 2 late guys. I'm getting them everywhere because I think there's something to be had there. What are your thoughts, Chris? I know there's another Cub you want to talk about, but your thoughts on Harold Ramirez?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of mixed on him. I had him for a while on my main event team last year, and I kept looking at the skills, and he's hitting the ball hard, and he has good speed, but he just didn't really provide much, when he was playing last year. So maybe I'm a little bit jaded by that. So I think he's fine. He's going at ADP of 492, so you really can't lose too much. But one guy just to give another option going in that range, I think I'd rather have like a Matt Vierling, just because I feel like the playing time is a little bit that there's a clearer path to playing time. At least now the Phillies may go sign somebody. But there's several openings in the Phillies outfield, and he's kind of a similar player in that he hits the ball hard. He's got some speed. So I think I'd rather have him than Ramirez, but I think Ramirez.
I will say one thing before we move on is that there's absolutely no reason why you can't have them both. And
that's true. Yeah.
And Tyrone Taylor, get all these guys, because at that point ADP is kind of irrelevant. The min and max picks is so wide. Right. You can kind of map up your draft to min one of them and try to land all three. So I love Verlander too. I think he's a great option. So I'm not going to disagree with you there, but I'm all for grabbing them all. Sure. So who's your next pick? Because I know he was right here on the Cubs, Chris.
Yeah, so I'm going with Wilson 2 L's Contreras. His name always just throws me off. But the reason I'm not that he's going to play whether he's with the Cubs or whoever he gets traded to. But that's the thing. I think there's a good chance that he gets traded before the season starts. I mean, and this is why I think that. Yan Gomes was signed by the Cubs to a 2-year, $13 million contract during the offseason. So I don't know, this actually may be more of like a Yan Gomes plug than anything. But I'm just like a little confused. If he's coming in as a backup and getting a 2-year, $13 million contract like that, especially on a team, I don't know what the hell the Cubs are doing. But it just seems like that's a heavy investment to make in a backup. So I feel like they were signing Gomes to be their catcher, knowing that they were going to, be trading Contreras. And I think, and not just because I'm a Yankee fan, but I think he seems like a perfect fit for the Yankees. I find it hard to believe that they're going to go into another season with Gary Sanchez behind the plate. And believe me, I'm not a Gary Sanchez hater. I just think the Yankees and him are like a relationship. It just doesn't work. They'd be better off just going their separate ways. I think Sanchez, he just needs a change of scenery. So all this is to say, I think Yan Gomes is actually not a bad second or third catcher. If he were to get the job in Chicago, he's someone who can give you above average power. His contact skills are good. So he's a guy that I'm targeting. And I think Contreras, depending on where he goes, like if he went to the Yankees, I think he gets a slight upgrade. May not get as many at bats because I don't know if the DH will be as open for him in that scenario. But I like him just fine as well.
No, I agree there. I think we talked about this before the show. We'll share with the audience, obviously, because that's who we're doing the show for. The Cubs, as it stands, it's so up in the air. Again, the Marcus Stroman thing threw everyone. Who knows? I mean, they stood by that their offers to all the people, all their core they traded away were all fair offers. And lo and behold, maybe they were, because Anthony Rizzo ain't touching the offer that they gave him. I mean, and it's some of the ones that they had sent out there weren't as embarrassing as we all thought. Rizzo could work his way back. They could sign an outfielder. We don't know. If they stick around, they could certainly have Contreras play and then have him and Gomes alternate between that DH and catcher position. But I do agree with you. Obviously moving off is something that they've hinted at. Gary Sanchez is everyone kind of expected him to get actually non-tendered. Didn't happen. Again, I brought him up earlier in the show. So one more time, Vlad Sedler, he put out these great projections of his own projected lineup. So we're talking about now. And I can't remember what the lineup was for the Yankees, but at the catcher position, it just said not Gary Sanchez. Basically he's like, he locked everyone in except, it's probably not going to be Gary Sanchez catching for the Yankees. So that would be interesting. Matty, if Wilson Contreras were traded, again, something else we were talking about, we think he'll actually get a lot of DH bats on this current Cubs team if they didn't make any moves, which who the heck knows? Let's just assume they don't do anything else crazy and he's here. Do you think the upgrade to the Yankees would be big enough to actually be an upgrade where he'd probably, he would lose all those DH at bats. He's obviously not going to DH for the Yankees. They have a couple of good hitters on that team that would be occupying that role. Overall, it's hard to say that it wouldn't be a plus. I would think it would have to be, but I mean, right now he could stand to gain a ton of at bats. He could get as many as any catcher if they don't sign another hitter there, because they're going to keep him in that lineup every day.
Yeah, if you're talking Contreras on the Yankees or Cubs, I think it's kind of a net zero thing here because he's going to get a lot with the counting stats with the at-bats he'll get with the Cubs because they have him projected to be the number 3 hitter. he's a 20 home run guy, 120 runs and RBIs at the very least over the last few years. So if they keep him there, they're going to keep him in the lineup probably more often than not. If he goes to the Yankees, they'll be more inclined to rest him, especially because their DH, they're loaded there. But some of the power stats, the runs, the RBIs, because he's in that lineup, will also be there. So I think overall, if that's the scenario, Yankees, Cubs, I don't think you'll see much of an upgrade either way. Now, if he goes to a team where, I don't know, a team this offseason that I'm kind of skeptical of in terms of their offense, like the Rangers, I think that could be a little bit of a downgrade. So I think that because the at-bats are there with the Cubs, I would like him to stay put unless he goes to like a dream scenario, like, I don't know, top dog offense, something like that.
I was going to say I wouldn't think the Rangers would go there because they have young catcher, but I don't know what the Rangers are doing. They're signing people to long-term contracts, and by the time they're good, the players they sign won't be good. I don't know what the Rangers are doing.
We don't know what they're doing.
That's Wilson Contreras. So we're talking about projected lineups and how we may disagree with them. We're using Roster Resource as our main reference. Matty, who's your next player that we're going to talk about? Did you notice anyone that there was a lineup placement you weren't agreeing with?
So you're a Yankees fan, Chris. I'm a Red Sox fan. I don't know how we're doing the show, but we put our differences aside. And we're good. We're good to keep it going. You know what I'm saying? But I'm going to stick with the Red Sox here, and I'm going to talk about the guy that they have right now in Roster Resource, projected to be their closer, Garrett Whitlock. I think the Red Sox have aspirations to put him in the lineup, and according to an article that came out—
I hope they're not putting him in the lineup. That would be horrible.
Starting rotation. Sorry. Yeah. Hey, who knows? Maybe the dude can rank. Who knows what Garrett Whitlock can do? We don't know his capabilities. But I do think that he has aspirations to be in the rotation. In a recent article that came out the end of February in the Boston Globe, he said that he still wants to become a starting pitcher. And he has the stuff to be a starting pitcher. Last year, he had 4 pitches. 3 of them were plus pitches. And I think he has the right tools to get himself not in the starting lineup, but in the starting rotation. Having said that, though, I do love his ADP either way. You're talking about a guy going around pick 240. The thing I would advise, if you are prone to take Whitlock, follow that sucker up with a Matt Barnes pick, a handful of rounds later around pick 280, because then you kind of hedge your bets there in terms of the closer for the Red Sox.
Garrett Whitlock is interesting, and I agree with you in the sense, and we're talking about Garrett Whitlock is definitely a player where shortened season could be interesting because his innings would be limited if they wanted to put in the rotation. The rotation is interesting though, because right now they have it listed as like a 6-man, but it's like
they have a bunch of those guys.
I mean, they have Eovaldi, Chris Sale, Nick Pivetta, Rich Hill, Michael Wacha, Tanner Houck. Not necessarily saying Whitlock can't knock any of them out there. He sure can, but they didn't sign those guys to not start. And Matt Barnes was awful. They signed him to that contract last year, but after he signed it, they benched him and kept him off the playoff roster. So I don't know where they're feeling on him. So I think the main thing is his ADP right now is beneficial because if he closes or starts, it's still going to help you.
Right.
What are you doing with Hill, and what are you doing with Hill if he's not pitching for you? He's going, if he's not starting, he's going to AAA probably. He's not going to be that useful of a pen. Michael Wacha can be. They just have a lot of guys there. So I like Whitlock either way. I'm not sure I see them. He would have to be pitching pretty well. Injuries tend to work. These things tend to work themselves out. Not wishing injury on anyone. It's baseball. Things happen. They always do. What do you think of Chris? We're talking Garrett Whitlock of the Red Sox here, where they have him listed right now as the closer, but as Matty was saying, he wants to start.
And don't say he stinks just because he's a Red Sox, Chris. Come on.
Well, he was a former Yankee, so
that's true. That's true.
So he's not that bad, but so with Whitlock, I think
every time we bring up a player, you sound exasperated, like we just brought up a terrible, like you're making me talk about this guy.
Yeah, no, because I don't know where he's currently going, and probably because I just took him in a draft as I was hoping he was going to be my second closer, and then that article came out, the Money in the News article, saying that he wants to start. So I guess I'm just a little upset about that. But, I think where he's going right now, he's not really going to pay off if he's in the starting rotation because you have to think about innings. We don't even know, is his stuff going to really hold in the rotation to the extent that it did last year, pitching in relief? So I don't look at it as like an either or, like he's going to be fine no matter what he does. Like I think you're taking a hit there if you're taking him at his current ADP. Yeah, but like you said, man, I don't know what the Red Sox are doing. They've brought in these guys. They brought in Rich Hill, Michael Waka. Like I would assume those guys are going to get a shot in the rotation. So I'm still a little skeptical of this report, but we'll see what happens.
Well, in the past, too, there was one guy for the Red Sox that had this desire to go back from the bullpen to the starting rotation. His name was Jonathan Papelbon. And when push came to shove, they needed him in the pen, and he became a closer for his whole career. So a similar trajectory for a guy like Whitlock is definitely not, out of the question.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the way I'm leaning, because if they don't get Kenley Jansen or get Kimbrel back, Whitlock's their best option to close.
Yeah.
So we'll just have to see there. And again, that's Garrett Whitlock of the Red Sox. Another guy that I saw on Roster Resource that I kind of disagree with, this is just a player that's been buried on the bench here, is Lars Nootbaar over on the Cardinals, and not because I just want to say his name.
Nootbaar.
He did fairly well last year. The only thing is he kind of has like this. He's a left-handed batter who batted 230 versus lefty, or batted 273 versus lefties, and only 230 versus righties. That's not something that's been. He's not a guy who traditionally has reverse splits throughout his entire minor league career. But this is a pretty right-handed heavy lineup. They have a couple of switch hitters in Tommy Edman and Dylan Carlson, but other than that, you got Goldschmidt, Arenado, O'Neill, Molina, DeYoung. They have in a DH currently Sosa, Bader, all right-handed. I think Lars Nootbaar currently will find his way into that lineup a heck of a lot more often than not. So, especially with the DH open, you don't know what is going to happen there. So, this is still something that is a little more of a deep league thing. In shallow formats, it's something you want to look at in spring training and monitor, because there's better dart throws to pick up at the end of a shallow format, and also the DH. Not necessarily going to Nootbaar. They have Juan Yepes, who could certainly earn that position too. So they have some other things going on there. But as a primarily right-handed heavy lineup, I think Nootbaar is someone that is going to find his way into that lineup currently, unless they make any other moves. So he's just no one super exciting. More of, again, if you're talking about drafts, deep league. Otherwise, it's kind of see what they're handling. But it's just something to keep an eye on, because everyday at bats are everyday at bats, and he looked good in glimpses last year. It's hard to have a lot of strong feelings about this player, Matty, but do you have any strong opinions on Lars Nootbaar?
I can say one thing about him that I do have a strong opinion on. I want him to succeed. The more we as a community can scream Nootbaar from the mountaintops, I'm game, baby. Give me Nootbaar all day long. I have a question for both of you, though. Do you think there's a chance that the guys on the team screw his name up, kind of like in a Henry Rowan Gardner way? Nudie Barties. Do you think that, or do you think they just?
I'm sure they have fun with it.
Nudies.
If I'm him, I would demand to just be called Newt, so I wouldn't have to hear this anymore. But it ain't gonna happen. I can only imagine what they call him. But
can you imagine if he was? Chris, you're a Yankees fan. Can you imagine what his home run call would be if he was on the Yankees? A nudie bomb for Nootbaar.
That is, John Sterling would have a field day with that.
I had so many ideas. I wanted to just do some impressions, but I'm going to spare everybody. I don't even know. We're off the rails here. I mean, he does a lot. I mean, he batted 239. With 124 at bats with 5 home runs, still had a positive weighted runs created plus. He has a pretty reasonable strikeout rate of 22% last year, but in the minors, 20% or less. And he has a double digit walk rate. So it's if he gets a shot in there, it's just, again, it's nothing spectacular here, but power a little. He stole a couple of bags. Sometimes you just need to fill in those guys, and you never know. The plate discipline works. And if it, it looks like it kind of carried over to the major leagues, and that's a positive sign.
Now, given the positive reverse split and the pretty good plate IQ, is that encouraging to you?
Yeah, if anything, I would think like, all right, he kind of showed he could handle left-handers rather than
Right.
being like, oh, he's a weird lefty guy who can't hit righties. I'm like, well, I think he probably will figure that out. He looked like he can hit lefties though, which is cool. Let's give him an opportunity here. So yeah, I think that they will certainly see what they have. They certainly don't have anyone that is like far and away blocking him from at bats.
Right.
What do you think, Chris?
I think he's the next Cedric Mullins, so we can move on. You want to hear mine?
Your next Cedric Mullins?
No,
Or-
my next player. I mean, I've already determined it's Lars Nootbaar. Yeah.
Everyone's saying the next like Robbie Ray and like the next Cedric Mullins. I think we all know. I mean, anyone who says that they give him a hard time because it's kind of bull crap. There's not going to be another one. If anyone knew they were going to be it last year, they were lying. That being said, I mentioned Tyrone Taylor earlier. If anyone's going to do like no, hold on. No, this is not me saying Cedric Mullins because he's not going to, I don't expect that. No one should. It's just remember Mullins, he kind of came into last year. We kind of knew he had some skill, but he didn't have a spot in the lineup. DJ Stewart, I believe, got injured, and then he started playing every day in spring training, and then Mullins got a spot. I drafted him everywhere just because of that. Not because I thought he was going 30-30, just because I saw a guy with a little power and speed that could possibly play a lot. Tyrone Taylor, I see the same thing. When you have an outfielder with Christian Yelich and Lorenzo Cain, I think he can find his way to everyday at bats. A little bit of power, a little bit of speed. Again, I'm drafting him for the same reasons and the same expectations I had for Cedric Mullins, and it's certainly not 30-30. But as far as the criteria of what I look for in late round guys, I do like Tyrone Taylor. He's the next Tyrone Taylor. Why don't we stick with that?
And
Who's your
real quick too, if Nootbaar is the next Mullins, we can all applaud because then next year everyone will be saying who's the next Nootbaar. And again, the more we can say Nootbaar, the more fun we're all gonna have.
We all win.
We all win, baby.
Yeah, or if you draft Nootbaar everywhere thinking he's the Mullins and he's not good, now you can turn him into a verb. You've been Nootbaar.
Yes.
Which is far more
like when we were Gombard last year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Gombard. Yeah, we've been Nootbaard. But there's no real expectations for Nootbaar.
If my wife hears that I've been Nootbaard and Gombard, I think she might think something's up.
Yeah.
All right, Chris, we're talking about our lineup projections and where we kind of disagree with roster resource and lineup projections. Just talking about Lars Nootbaar. Chris, who's your next guy?
So I'm going to go back to the Nationals and go to Joan Adon. So this is a super deep. I think this guy is going like past pick 700. So
real quick, everyone in your car, wherever, if you're doing your laundry, you're doing your taxes, raise your hand if you know who Chris is talking about.
What about people on the podcast?
All right, go ahead, Chris.
And that's why I'm bringing him up, because we're bringing some useful info today. So looking at roster resource, the back of the Nationals rotation is uglier than my little league stats. I mean, it is wretched. Josh Rogers, Paolo Espino. I mean, these guys are not, no offense to those guys, but they're not major league starters. Joan Adon is interesting. I didn't know who he was until a couple weeks ago. But I was in like the 49th round of my DC, and I'm looking for anybody with a pulse who I could pick there. And I came across him, and I found it interesting because he pitched one game at the end of last season after he moved up 3 levels in the minor leagues. He started last year in single A, moved all the way up to the big leagues by the end of the year.
Hey, the last guy who did that was Juan Soto, everybody, of the Nationals. So
there we go. Yeah, the pitching version of Juan Soto. There we go. But in that game, he started one game against the Red Sox. Now, remember, it was that last series when the Red Sox had to win, right, to get into the playoffs.
Yep.
In that game, he pitched, I believe it was 5 2/3 innings with 9 strikeouts and had like a 35% CSW in that game. So, listen, can we go off of that and say he's, going to be the next Steven Strasburg? Obviously not. But I think for someone to come up for one start and show those skills, that's impressive. And looking at the minor league analyst in Baseball America, Baseball HQ's minor league analyst, it shows that, he has a plus fastball. He's got a good slider. The guy has some ability, and I think he's going to have an opportunity. And when you're talking that late in a draft, anybody who's going to get any playing time is, someone to look at. So He's a guy that I'm targeting in like, past pick 700.
And this Chris is picking Jan Odon over on the Washington Nationals. And it's unfortunate no one's ever going to hear this because I'm going to delete it out of the podcast because I have him on all my DC teams and I'm not letting anyone know this information.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
No, I leave everything in.
Exposing you.
I'll leave everything in, but yes, absolutely. Like the biggest thing that you said, I mean, obviously the main thing is his talent and his strikeout ability. He's like K per nine over the last couple levels is like above 15. He does give up home runs. He does give up walks. But again, just like someone else in the Nationals rotation, Josiah Gray, we're expecting him to take a big step forward and maybe tame a little bit of the walks. Nowhere near that amount of hype around Adon, but he doesn't have a lot of people to fight through to get an opportunity. And you can't find that kind of upside that late, especially in like a draft champions where you're drafting 700 people. Again, something still worth monitoring in shallow formats, because if he is going to pick up a spot, even with his flaws, giving up some walks, he still can be quite valuable. Matty, you admittedly had no idea, like most people mostly don't know who the heck this guy is. After hearing all this, are you any intrigue?
I am going to greatly appreciate you cutting this section out, because people in my leagues, I would not like them to hear, because man, Chris, I think you're on something, man. And I think I want to grab him so I can get on the train. He kind of reminds me, just by looking at his pitch mix and kind of how he locates as a Huascar Noah, and we saw how successful he was with 2 pitches for the Braves. Those are the type of guys that kind of come through on a team that's rebuilding. I kind of like what I see here. I do. I know it's super limited, and you're looking at a lot of fast tracking here, but man, if Adon is available super late in my drafts, he will be a gone real quick.
That's very good. So I just want to make another quick point. I brought up 2 Nationals, and I think this is important because these are both young guys that I'm talking about. The Nationals are aggressive. Like we remember Juan Soto. He was up. Obviously, dude is a baseball god, but he was up at age 20. Luis Garcia was up in 2020, and I believe he was 19 at that time.
Yeah, they aggressively traded away their entire team and didn't wait to rebuild. They brought Gray up, they brought Ruiz up last year when they traded Turner and Scherzer. So they
don't baby these guys. So I think all the more reason, if you see a young player on that team with ability, you don't really have to worry about them kind of milking service time or whatever. Like, they're going to play them if they have skill.
All right, and we've gone. We're near the end here. If you guys have another important person to bring up, we'll definitely do it. My last guy is the guy. It's the Mets. This is no disagreement with roster resource, but it is something that is dragging down the value of players that should have more value, and that's the fact that they currently have Robinson Cano starting at DH, platooning with J.D. Davis. They have Mcneil at the bottom of the lineup batting at second base, and Eduardo Escobar in every day at third base. The Mets may sign a third baseman, pushing Eduardo Escobar to second. Where does Jeff McNeil go? Not left field, because they have Mark Canha now, and Brandon Nimmo and Starling Marte. Is he going to be benched? Probably not, because he's probably going to be traded. Is J.D. Davis going to be benched? No. He's probably going to be traded. Is Dom Smith going to be benched? No. Is he going to play first base? No, because Pete Alonso doesn't want to DH either. The 2 of these guys are being traded. You don't know who, unfortunately, but Jeff McNeil is a surefire bet to play every day. If J.D. Davis finds everyday bats elsewhere, maybe Oakland, where they match up well, not the best ballpark, and Dom Smith, maybe after they trade Matt Olson, they'll need a first base. Dom Smith could be traded. J.D. Davis could be traded. Jeff McNeil could be traded. These guys are going so late in drafts. If they just had everyday at bats nailed down today, forget about how Jeff McNeil struggled last year. Forget about J.D. Davis's soft tissue injuries. If they had an everyday job nailed down right now, they'd be going significantly earlier. And I would think that there's a very good chance all 3 end up with a lot of at bats, if not at least 2 of the 3. You are gambling a bit, but the payoff could be huge, because I think all 3 do bounce back. Probably 2 of them aren't going to be even on the Mets, but I think the at-bats are definitely going to be there for these guys, and they are being virtually undrafted in shallow formats. So again, I don't want to talk up anyone in particularly. JD Davis, when he's healthy, he's good. That's just a fact. He's a baller. He hits. Jeff McNeil, as much as everyone hates the MLB Network shredder, and I kind of think it's stupid, he was listed as like the second best second baseman in baseball at the end of the 2019 season, and now everyone think he just sucks. He had a whole season kind of haunted by soft tissue injuries. He will be back. And again, I'm not saying he should be drafted in the top 100 like he was. Right now, his ADP is like far and away, like, again, on almost undrafted in shallow formats. So, the Mets, they have a ton of infielders that are going to find their way to at bats. And I think that it's definitely something worth taking a shot on at the end of your bench in shallow formats, or definitely in deep formats. Chris, do you have any thoughts there? Because again, this is me coming from a Mets fan who thinks that Robinson Cano has a good chance of being released. But there's a lot of moving parts. And like I said, I do mean moving.
Yeah, I don't see a scenario where Cano ends up batting fifth in the middle of that lineup. I mean, this dude debut, I was basically in diapers when he made his debut back in 2005. I mean, I was 19 at the time, but that's besides the point. I was a little bit of a late bloomer. But listen, I think it's more likely that the Mets DFA him than he starts the year, playing every day and, even on a strong side of the platoon. I mean, this is a new regime. They're not the ones who made that god-awful trade for him. I think it's much more likely we see like a Dom Smith, JD Davis platoon, or I just don't see him being not that you have to really spend much to find out. Like you could take a shot on Cano at like pick 450 or whatever it is, but I don't think it's likely that he's going to be playing regularly for the Mets.
What do you think, Matty? Do you have any interest? I don't know what kind of drafts you've been doing early, if you're doing deep formats or shallow. If you speculate on any of these Mets, again, just a recap for everyone listening, we're talking about Jeff McNeil, Dom Smith, JD Davis, pretty much buried in ADP because pretty much for a couple of them, just a lot of soft tissue injuries last year and just an uncertainty of at bats that I'm pretty sure most of them will find in the 2022 season.
I have a limited interest in, honestly, the three that you mentioned, because Jeff McNeil, regardless of how we feel about him as a fantasy community, it seems like the baseball community as a whole is still high on this guy. So if the Mets can use him and put him in a trade package to bolster wherever they're looking to do so, because clearly they want to win now, he could get a whole bunch of at-bats. And I like his profile. I like him as a player. But the guy that I've been really monitoring super late in drafts is Dom Smith. About a year ago, when we were talking, there was rumor that maybe the 2021 season had universal DH. Dom Smith was like the kind of darling of that whole talk. And we saw a humongous fall off between 2020 and 2021. But I still think he's around a 300 hitter, even though last year it fell off a little bit of a cliff. He's got good plate IQ. And, when you see a guy with a runs created plus of 134, 166, and then kind of crater to 86, I think if you give him everyday at bats and you give him job security, because at the end of the day, these guys are human, they need a little bit of job security. I think he could go that as a guy that can go a long way, and he's still pretty young. I mean, Dom Smith, we're talking about going into his age 27 season. That's his prime right there.
I agree wholeheartedly. For anyone in the audience wondering, are you flipping through an Encyclopedia Britannica there, Chris? What are you looking through there?
Oh, I got my forecaster.
Okay.
I'll show you. This thing is so beat up. It's gotten so much use that this thing is about to fall apart.
It truly is a fantastic.
Oh, it's amazing.
For anyone out there, I mean, you can get them. You can get it around like Thanksgiving. It's it's always an early Christmas present for you, early holiday present. So yeah, make sure you go out and get one of those. It's fantastic. So yeah, we were just talking about the New York Mets. We went through this whole show talking about lineup placement as far as predictions, places like Roster Resource, and where we disagreed with players. So before we wrap things up, Matty, Chris, is there anyone else in particular you wanted to talk about? If not, we do have a question from the audience that we'll end the show with.
Nothing pressing. I just want to take this chance to say it one last time. Newt Bar.
We've been Newt Barred. It's like being Rickrolled. We need to get some music for it. Maybe I get Michael Govier to sing a song about Newt Bar.
Perfect. Perfect.
Chris, do you have anyone else you wanted to mention as far as lineup predictions?
Jake Fraley is this year's Cedric Mullins.
Oh God, Jake Fraley. We're gonna end the show with our Brian K in the chat. Hey gents, waiting to see where Brad Miller lands. He has 20 games in the outfield. What do you think about a strong side of a platoon and possibly a DH in the NL? Thank you. That's one thing we didn't talk about again early in the show. If anyone's catching the end, you can catch the go to the beginning, subscribe to the show if you're watching live on YouTube, 5 stars, rate and review, the whole thing. We really appreciate it. But we talked about how a extended absence for opening day may actually impact fantasy baseball. And we didn't get to players where, there's certainly the guys like Carlos Correa and the big time names that don't have a job. But again, a guy like Brad Miller, especially in really deep formats, is interesting because like his appeal is really not that great when he doesn't have a job, but he has a ton of actual appeal. Again, last year, only 227 batting average, but again, 20 home runs and only 377 at bats. He did swipe 3 bags, 12% walk rate. 227 average still worked out to a 105 weighted runs created plus. That just shows you how much value adds regardless of the low batting average. So, what do you think, Chris, of a player like this? I mean, there's a lot of moving parts. How do you feel about investing in a veteran like Brad Miller, who, if he lands in the right spot, he could have plenty of value?
Yeah, I think he's a great guy to target. He has eligibility at first base, outfield. I think he will find himself on the strong side of a platoon. He showed good skills. He's 32, so it's not, he's going to find a job. So I think he's a great target for where he's going.
What do you think, Matty? Because I mean, there's certain guys that aren't in there every single day. There's gadget guys. There's people get super excited about a player like Joey Wendell, like who in the Rays, who got moved over to the Marlins. He batted 265, only 11 home runs, 8 stolen bases. Again, nice. He did have over 500 at bats. Now we're talking about a guy like Brad Miller that's full platoon, still 20 home runs though, and 377 at bats. Obviously, this is something that works out great if you're in a daily roster league. If you are in a day or on a weekly lineup league, you may have to see, what kind of pitchers are have coming up and all that kind of things. It depends on how deep your bench is and a lot of other factors. But if there's a situation where you can fit him on your bench, how do you feel about a guy like Brad Miller?
He is somebody that I would like to throw on my bench, but I mean, you're talking super league dependent, like you mentioned, because you got to be able to get him in where he's going to excel or he's going to get the at-bats. You see 3-4 lefties on the schedule, he ain't playing, right? So you get him in. But what I do like about him is when you look across his career and you look at his WRC plus, he's been above average most years of his career. And that's just something that isn't a fantasy category per se, but I think it lends to the perception if he's an above average player. And he's an above average player. And if you can get guys late, I want above average players late on my bench.
Yeah. So for Brian, thank you for the question on Brad Miller. His value is essentially draft and hold, which is no free agency, 50 rounds, where you can put him in there. And then when the week comes up where he happens to be facing the platoon side that he sees a lot of right-handers, then you want to put him in there. Or in shallow formats, I don't think you can't really afford to hang on to him full term, but he's someone that maybe even 2 weeks ahead of time, if you look like you're not going to be I'm always for shopping 2 weeks ahead of time, because once Fab comes up, a guy like Brad Miller is facing all of a sudden like 6, right-handers, and you think he'll be in there a lot. All of a sudden, people will bid him a lot higher. 2 weeks ahead of time, if you know that you aren't going to be starting someone on your bench, look ahead of time, see, all right, in 2 weeks, Brad Miller's going to have a good thing. You can pick him up for $1, put him on your bench, and then you already have him for cheap the next week. So those are the kind of guys you always want to kind of scope out the schedule and see what's happening ahead of time. Now, not everyone has the time, but if you can certainly save some money, especially in fab leagues. So that'll do it for the Turn 2 podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. Hopefully we get ourselves some baseball really soon. For everyone out there, I said, MLB's locked out. Baseball's not locked out. Go to my Twitter account. I'm giving away tickets to minor league games for you and your entire family. All you got to go there and just put in the comment section where your local minor league team is. And I'm going to be giving away some. It's a fun time. You go to get some baseball, and that's starting on time. They're starting in the beginning of April. So go do that. Go get yourself some free tickets. I love baseball, and I want everyone to stay optimistic. Good vibes, all new bars all around. So Matty, Chris, thank you for joining me. Real quick before we go, Matty, tell everyone where they can chase you down, where they can find all your work, and if you have anything cool coming up.
So you can find me on Twitter at Matty Kiwoom. You can find me on TikTok at Matty Kiwoom as well. I do a podcast on couchguysports.com called High Heat Fantasy Baseball. Check us out there. And I got some articles coming out. SP Streamer, the fam, the squad, we're doing well over there. And I love those guys. And just check out my stuff. That's where you can pretty much find it.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely follow Matty. And Chris, we already talked about your great videos. If anyone, again, didn't hear that part here in the beginning of the show, you definitely want to follow Chris. Where can they find you, and what do you have planned for the upcoming season?
So mine is simple. Just I'm on Twitter at Torres Takes. I'll be guesting on some pods coming up. Maybe get back into a little bit of writing, but we'll see if I can make the time for it. But yeah, just follow me on Twitter. Going to be making some more videos. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
No problem. It was a great show. I think people get a lot out of it. Thank you for listening to the Turn 2 podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the show if you're not already, wherever you're listening to podcasts. Subscribe to the show on YouTube. You can join the chat. We do it live every week. You can get in here. We'll answer your questions. Follow me on Twitter at MATTWI77IMS. Check out my weekly column over at NBC Sports Edge by the numbers. Next Tuesday, I'll be talking all about the shift. No one's talking about it yet. The owners have made it clear that they're trying to sneak that into the CBA, the no shift. If there's no shift, that changes the value of a ton of players. Some worthless players could become stars, and there's going to be a big dynamic. I mean, the shift ended Chris Davis's career. Ryan Howard, the injuries didn't help, but it kind of ended Ryan Howard's career. It ended Matt Carpenter's career. I mean, the shift being gone will be huge. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Anyone, if you ever want to talk baseball, again, this is a really difficult time for some people. They love baseball as a distraction. If you ever want to talk about anything, my DMs are always open. I love talking about baseball or anything. You can reach out to me and we'll talk. So again, thank you for listening to the show. We'll be back next week. See everybody.